Welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade, and today I'm here with Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Cade. Thanks. Good to be here.
I am so glad you're here. It is great to get to keep connecting here after getting to spend a little bit of time at KubeCon.
Yeah, that was awesome. It was really fun getting to meet people who I had just seen there last year or just known a little on the internet and reconnect.
Joe has done a variety of projects, but today I want to explore a little bit of one that you've worked on called the alternate timeline. But before I get to that, I want to ask first, how did you find your way into cubing?
Yeah, for sure. So I I'm gonna do like the very short speed run from my youth where I started playing Magic in the 90s. Played for like 3 years until Homelands hit, and then my friends either thought Magic wasn't cool anymore or the cards were too bad or some combination. I quit for a long time and played for about 3 years in college, quit for a really long time, and started playing again in 2017 when somebody at work told me they were playing Magic over the weekend. And I asked if I could come play, and turned out that they all played Commander. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years until DSB was over at my house. I think we had Thanksgiving or something.
Friend of the show, DSB.
Friend of the show, DSB, and I had given my daughter a little pack, like the old starter deck cards, the box that you would buy a starter deck from old sets. So it was from Kamigawa or something, which was a set I really didn't like. So I gave her this box. It's like, hey, put something in this box, and
A very thoughtful gift.
yeah, exactly. I think I had maybe given her some magic cards that I didn't want that had very wholesome art, like a shark and what have you. And so she had that box sitting out, and DSB saw it and told me, "Hey, we should play Magic sometime." And told me he had a cube, which I didn't really understand. Then COVID happened, and we went into lockdown and didn't really get to see people. But he put together some drafts and some sealed things that we did online playing his cube Ancient Times. Man, it was amazing. I mean, between the combination of not getting to see anyone or do anything and playing this format where things were more automatically balanced and people didn't just have better cards and blow someone out of the water and, the bad feelings that can go along with that. I was hooked. It was super fun. And we played that cube online and then in person, a smaller version, a 180 card version, just me and him and another friend who lives in town after we started kind of getting out of lockdown. And yeah, it was great. Pretty fun way to come into Cube, I think. Just kind of perfect for me because it involved a lot of old cards that had nostalgia built in. And I'd say that cube was kind of my introduction and is the cube I've played the most. If you haven't played Ancient Times, I would give it a look. It's pretty neat.
You know, when most people say that they started playing online or really learned to play a lot online, that's not usually what they mean. Playing
Yeah,
remotely with friends like that.
yeah. This was more some of DSB's friends from living elsewhere in the country, and we were on Discord for audio and just playing on Cockatrice, and we would kind of build decks sealed, or we even did an asynchronous draft on Cube Cobra that took us like 2 weeks, kind
Oh
of the
my
way people
goodness.
normally do a roto draft, but somehow it worked. It didn't crash or anything, and we did this draft where it would be like packs would pile up on one person and people would be pinging you, so you'd pull it up and do a bunch of quick picks, and by the end I feel like I'd lost track of what my deck even plan was, but it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And nowadays, there are so many other tools that are really good for rotisserie drafts. I believe Anthony Maddox has created a spreadsheet for that nowadays, but I love the ingenuity of just leave Cockatrice up and running.
Yeah.
This gap from Homelands to like 2017 era, it sounds like that's going to really inform a lot of what you did with your own cube design.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think there was a spot in between there in 2002 or 3 to 2006 where I was playing with some of my college friends. Kind of the inverse of the story I just described. I was in somebody's dorm room and saw a pile of Magic cards and remembered, hey, I used to like that game, but my friends quit playing and so did I. And so me and that person started playing, and we would play in an open space, and other people would see us and they'd say, "Hey, I used to play that." And pretty soon it snowballed, and we had 8 or 10 people who would play. But right around then, Mirrodin came out, and one of our friends built this deck that was all this synergy around equipment. If this creature is equipped, it gets all these bonuses. You can kill the creature, but the equipment sticks around. And I guess I just still have a sour taste in my mouth for that equipment.
Yeah,
So
it's funny,
yeah, that's
the things that people are upset for Mirrodin about, usually not equipment, but I can see, like, where, yeah, if you're not prepped for that, if that's not the level that you're playing on, then, yeah, that's gonna be pretty rough.
yeah, I think, it's not rational, but at the time, I was still playing kind of with a fifth grader's skill set of here are some cool cards from my collection. I like the art, and man, if I ever get to cast this 6 drop, it's going to be kind of okay.
And that's totally fine if everybody's doing that, right? Or if everybody's in a similar vein where, well, if you get your cool 6 drop before their cool 6 drop, then we can hang.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think another thing that has really shaped my feelings, and not really rational thoughts, but emotional reactions over the years, has been I remember getting excited when some new cards came out back then. And then later in 2010 or something, when a friend of mine came to town and wanted to like crack a box and play some games with the cards, getting excited about some card as a build around. And I don't remember what it was, something kind of janky. So I went online and looked up, hey, what decks are people playing at tournaments? And I just remember feeling so deflated
Oh, no.
that my idea was just not even in the same universe as what people were really doing, right? It was like, here's my deck with a bunch of basic lands and high mana curve things, and people are just playing a deck that's mostly fetch lands and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that feeling that the non-optimal thing, the non-optimized version just wasn't even relevant, really felt bad. This is kind of like the experience of brewing up a commander deck and then going on to EDH Rec to see, oh, did I get close to the mark? What's the actual supposed agreed best way to do this? And realizing, oh God, those are way better cards, way better deck than what I put together. But is it as fun? So I think that's part of what attracted me to Cube, is that nobody knows what the optimal way to build a deck within this environment is, if this environment is unique enough. And it's kind of a new space for everybody to kind of discover and play at the same time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I didn't want to jump straight to the conclusion there, but I could see where those threads are going. What is optimal is contingent on what the environment is. And so if you can change the environment, you can make different things optimal, or at least different things interesting.
Yeah, like I like the idea of not even knowing what's optimal, you know? It's just an unknown, and we don't have to have that knowledge kind of shortcutting what we would do otherwise, right? It feels like now with the internet, there's all these heuristics that are built out of large amounts of data and tons of people working together to basically solve formats. And yeah, that feels like something is lost, like some of the magic is gone after all
Yeah.
that.
I know you've touched on some small environments as well that it's kind of impossible to approach with a heuristic because it's completely unlike anything else that's come before it, at least for your own experiences.
Yeah, I think that's probably valid. I do also think that I am a less experienced and less skilled player than most people who I met at KubeCon, who are cube designers, and so they might feel differently. They might feel like they can shortcut straight to the best thing, but I definitely haven't felt that way with things like, I think you're talking about the Five Alive format and some of these others.
Yeah. Or at least it's, I suppose it's different enough that it's not like, oh yeah, you take the fetch land first or whatever. It's just a different enough thing that you have to retool how you're thinking about it.
Sure.
So before we get into Five Alive in any great detail, let's talk about one of your main projects. Let's talk about alternate timeline. Do you want to start by giving us an overview for this project?
Yeah, so where this came from was we had played Ancient Times a ton, and I started to feel like I wanted to make little tweaks. Like, wouldn't it be cool if this deck you can build also had these tools. And I realized actually I just wanted to make my own cube. And so it kind of started out as me trying to make a cube like ancient times, but with newer cards. And also with kind of the caveat that I wanted to be able to play it with DSB and another person who we were playing with a lot, who basically had barely played Magic since the 90s and then had played with us, about every week for 6 months. So I wanted to leave out a lot of the complexity in modern cards. I didn't want to have this person just feeling completely overwhelmed. And this also kind of gave me an excuse to keep out some card types that aren't my favorite, like equipment and like planeswalkers and like sagas.
Yeah, I was going to say, and certainly in your overview, you have a number of things that you've chosen to exclude, very thoughtfully, I would add. But kind of give us a rundown of some of what those are.
Yeah, so like just mentioned, like planeswalkers, equipment, sagas, basically anything where somebody who had been Rip Van Winkled since the 90s, if they looked at it, would it look like a magic card to them? And if so, then it gets to be in there. Some kind of wrinkles to that. I didn't put in any hybrid mana symbols or equipment, which people might think, hey, that looks like a magic card. But also no double faced, no split cards, no sagas or talents or anything like that. Basically, I think the effect might be, hey, this is easier for new people to wrap their head around. But also, if you totally understand all those, but just want a simplified experience, then this could potentially be that. We played it KubeCon 2023 on the third day or something when our brains were all fried, and it felt pretty nice to have something where you just didn't have to think as much.
Yeah, you don't have to explain the initiative on
Right.
on day three.
Yeah.
So, getting to a list of exclusions like this, was that something that you just kind of established on a card by card basis, or is it something that you developed in a different way?
I think part of where this started was I had a bunch of cards from playing Commander, and I just took them out and put them in a pile and started sorting through and saying, what seems like it would be fun? What cards do I think would be fun to play in this cube? And every time something came up, I thought about, what's this other person's experience going to be when they first see this card? And so basically, I ran into all these situations, right? Planeswalkers and equipment, and thought, that just doesn't sound like we're going to have a fun time of that on a Friday night. That goes in the other pile, and I'm making a rule. None of those.
Yeah, and, and by the way, I love Rip Van Winkled as a verb. But yeah, if somebody's been out of commission for a long time and then you come back and generally like get beaten by something you've never seen before, like that can leave a sour taste.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say like that was kind of the start of the process. The timing was really nice because I had just been listening to Lucky Paper, and they put out an episode about making your first cube the week I was doing all this. So I think that helped a lot. And part of their suggestions was just put together a list and try it, and then you'll make cuts. So I did that. Got some very generous help with the first couple playtests from DSB and from my brother-in-law, who weirdly hasn't asked to play Magic with me again. No, he just doesn't play that
Maybe
much.
unrelated, yeah.
Yeah, unrelated. But I think that advice people give is really good because that helped me to realize right off the bat that there were all kinds of things in there I didn't actually want. Right, I just had this card kicking around and thought, oh, I'll give it a home. And so, like everybody says, huge amounts of change after that.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting on your list, you noted top tier or high powered cards that you've seen a lot of in other constructed formats. Is that like a specific exclusion, or is that like just kind of a way to keep cards like Ragavan or Force of Will out of the pile?
Yeah. So part of this is from my experience prior to Cube playing Commander, where cards that the caster was really excited about. Like I really like playing Sensei's Divining Top anytime I got an excuse to. But man, your opponents often really dislike it and will groan a lot, right? And when you know every time that you're looking at the top three, that their internal patience is just going away super fast and they're getting more and more frustrated, it kind of takes away a little bit of the fun. So I I do feel like sometimes especially power maxed cubes, kind of turn into this murderer's row of cards that have had the biggest impact because the designers maybe were coloring a little bit outside the lines and made this monster on accident, right? Things like Skull Clamp. So yeah, I've been trying to not include those and include more kind of weird cards whenever I can, just to also kind of hopefully shape this format into a more unique and quirky space where people don't necessarily know what the optimal deck looks like.
And it sounds like your intent is weird but still grokkable. So it's not unusual by way of complexity as much as flavor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think also I mentioned that I feel like I don't have as much experience and skill, but mostly experience and knowledge of what has happened during these times of Magic where I've been out of it. So I've found some cards and been like, wow, I found the weirdest card for my cube. This is going to be great. And then somebody else brings their cube that week to cube night, and I see multiple of these supposed new cards that I discovered in their cube. So I think it feels often to me like I'm discovering these utterly unique and unheard of things, and everybody else knows about them.
But new for you, right?
For me, yeah, yeah.
One other restriction I like that I think I've heard many other designers lean toward is that you don't have many effects that do library searching, with the exception of you have noted Path to Exile.
Yeah, yeah. That's again kind of came from playing Ancient Times and was one of the design constraints for Ancient Times that I just copy pasted over because I really like the simplicity of you shuffle up, it's time to play, and we're not going to spend half the time shuffling and trying to figure out if you want to cut my deck or not. The library is just there. So that is a constraint that I feel tempted to change sometimes because the more people are building a deck around a single card, but they're not able to search for it, the more tension there is. So, one of the things that I got convinced to try after this most recent CubeCon is next time we fire this cube at the local store, we're going to try just using the companion rule from the companion cube by Dinro Vahar.
Excellent.
And yeah, I'm pretty excited to try that. With no clue what's going to happen if we're going to decide, wow, that was a horrible idea, or wow, that was amazing. But I'm pretty excited.
Well, I remember chatting with Greg, and his suggestion was, yeah, you should just try this with different cubes, and it may actually work out really well. So it sounds like you're on the right path.
Yeah, I remember him saying that online a few 6 months ago or something, and I I basically just copy pasted that message into our local cube Discord chat, and somebody said, "Yeah, let's try that with my cube," and it's become a consistent rule that we use for one person's cube, but a little different. They have the updated companion rules where you have to pay 3 to put it in your hand. So I'm also kind of intrigued to try it with one of our local cubes without that, just to see what is it like if we run it just like the companion cube?
And that's really cool. Not to wax too poetic, but there's something nice about how open source some of this design is in a way that you can go find something cool that somebody else has done and perhaps with appropriate credit, take that idea and then apply it to something new and see what comes of it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So the ancient times that DSB has put together is a bit more about history broadly, I think. Is alternate timeline one that you make changes to with each new set as it comes out, or is your adjustment process a little different than that?
I mostly make changes when a new set comes out. I look at the new cards every time. I have a probably inefficient but very complicated Scryfall search that I like to plug in that mostly it's just taking out things like is there a planeswalker? Is it a double faced card? So I'll do that whenever there's a new set coming out and I'll read through. Like I did this for Duskmorn and just felt like almost nothing stuck. Now I'm actually not sure if I did put cards in from Duskmorn. Potentially 0 to 3. Uh, I I've basically been doing it and have found that some sets like the Brothers War are just perfect and a number of cards go in. And other sets just don't feel quite right. Maybe there's more complicated mechanics, maybe there's just a lot of double-faced cards, or maybe like the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set, I just really didn't like the look of a lot of cards. And the fact that they all had these guns that weren't guns just really turned me off. So yeah.
I mean, I could see where a slick shot rifle, not exactly the aesthetic you're thinking about for for an alternate version of Magic, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of wanted this to feel like old school Magic, but without any kind of aesthetic filter. Like it doesn't matter if it's an actual old card or a new border card or whatever. But kind of along the lines of me being a crotchety old grump who doesn't like planeswalkers and doesn't like equipment. I actually kind of like equipment, but uh, I really have never liked foil cards or cards with special treatments. So a special border, borderless. I actively try to avoid having those. And that is one design aesthetic of the cube is there's not a single foil card or a single card that has a weird special treatment.
And the secret benefit to that is that most of the showcase cards issue reminder text for that, so making sure that nobody's left out on those too.
Yeah, I have noticed that some of the cards that have a special look don't have reminder text, right? They'll just say menace. And some of my players I don't think still know what menace is. So I really appreciate having reminder text even on some of those abilities that folks have probably grown pretty much accustomed to. I feel also like it sounds like I didn't understand what certain versions would look like, which it's kind of crazy, but I guess I haven't fully wrapped my head around booster fun and everything that came along with it.
Hey, you're allowed to be a grumpy old man. That's fine. As you think about alternate timeline, are there design principles that you apply to this environment that you would also apply to other things you're working on?
Yeah, I think partly when I started, I was mostly just aiming to leave out these card types that I thought were confusing or would be a struggle for someone new. I found that I was really attracted to, and I felt like cards were a really good fit in this environment when they had just less rules text, fewer abilities. And so I've been really more and more attracted to that sort of card that maybe just has one paragraph. And I've found myself more and more gravitating to that kind of card, like just very simple, very easy to understand, kind of one where you could imagine an opponent might ask to read it, but not need to read it again in a couple
Yeah,
minutes.
that's a really good rule of thumb. I like that. Like you just have to read it once.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, wait, what happens on the third chapter? I forgot that one already, or I didn't have the patience to read it the first time. There's another kind of design element, but first, I should ask you a question. Are you familiar with the magic terminology Lunchable?
I am not. This is new for me.
I think this is a term that we invented in the Cube Talk Discord. I think it was me and DSB and Henry Clay. It's a derogatory term. So we use this to refer to cards that ask you to jump through a hoop, maybe in their first paragraph. And if you keep reading the card, you find that they also just jump through the hoop. And I asked some folks on there today about it. And somebody said, I think this is mostly a design from commander cards, a thing from commander cards. And one of the ones that they mentioned was Prosper Tomebound, right? Which
Yep.
lets you cast cards from exile. It will exile cards off the top of your library. It also gives you a treasure whenever you cast cards from exile, right? So it's kind of fueling itself. It's a self-fueling engine. And so I think there's some cards that feel like an absolute perfect home run for alternate timeline. There's a whole discard theme, there's a madness theme. And so like Inti Seneschal of the Sun feels like it just does everything that I would want. But it feels like it does everything I would want too perfectly, and all you need is that. And
Right.
I really wanted this cube to be more where you're building some synergistic engine, but you need multiple pieces to fit together before it really turns on. So I've been trying to avoid cards like that. Lunchables.
So no Lunchable.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like, it's the setup and the payoff all together.
Right. And we gave it the name Lunchable just because that's sort of like a pre-packed everything you need all in one place meal, but we've also grown to feel like it's low quality bad food, and so that's the derogatory part.
Well, it's a shame that I just lost my Lunchable sponsorship here, but I think it's a great term that captures what you're talking about so well, and that's gonna stick in my mind. Joe, is there a particular card that seems emblematic of the style of play you want people to experience when they're engaged with this environment?
That really, really reminds me of a question that we ask almost as a joke now. Someone will ask at our cube nights when somebody tells folks their opening speech, hey, here's the cube, this is what to expect. DSB started this, but someone will chime in and ask, what's the best card in the cube? and and they don't necessarily just mean what's the best, but what's your favorite, right? And so I think 3 times in a row I've told people in this cube it's Dark Confidant, and that comes from a couple places. One is the cube's pretty low curving. There's more 2 drops than anything else. There's maybe 10% of the cards are 4 and 5 drops. It's also maybe that I didn't have that card for years and wanted it and wanted to have a place to play it. And now that I do, I really, really love having it or having opponents play it because it feels like it's just super fun, whether you're losing to it or winning with it. So I think that's one that I would kind of say, regardless of whether it's the most emblematic, just because I like it so much. I mean, Dark Confidant's almost good everywhere, right? Like it's been
Depends on your mana curve, Joe.
yeah, it depends on your mana curve, but it's been good in so many places, right? So saying, oh yeah, Dark Confidant is good here. Another one that I actually think is a pretty cool card here is Drafna, founder of Latinam, which is
Yes.
do you know that one?
I do. Well, I actually put it in a 5 Alive list I was working on recently.
That's really cool. So I like this card partly because I've formed this really strong emotional connection to it. I'm a professor. This guy's a professor. He's a little dork working on something in there. Um, in the folks that I played Commander with for years do an annual sort of a tournament where people bring their most tuned up Commander deck, and it's kind of like take off all the stops that you would normally have and just build whatever's the strongest. And we play all day. And so I built some deck with Draftno where I was trying to do some infinite combo, and it was super fun. But afterward, I thought, wow, I really like this card. It's actually way more flexible than it feels to be able to bounce an artifact back to your hand whenever you want for 2 mana to maybe save it from getting destroyed. And then if you have enough mana to spend 3 extra and copy some artifact. And at KubeCon, one of the pods I got to fire of this cube, one of the 3.0 drafters had built this crazy artifact deck, and they used DraftNet to copy multiple artifacts in both games with that I played with them, and it was really cool. They made an awesome machine. So that's one that I really want to be like the answer because I really like that card, and I feel like I've almost cut it a couple times because I was worried that it was just a pet card of mine.
No, it's really cool, and I mean, subtle nod to Hercule's recall that it picks back up your artifacts, and then once he's figured out the blueprints, you get to make more of the artifacts that you may have picked back up.
Totally, totally. Let's take this one apart and then build it again.
Exactly. It's cool, and it's nice when the flavor can coincide with mechanics in a way that is interesting, and you can go a couple different directions. And this has like fewer than 15 words on it. Like you can do something cool without it being overbearing.
Could I tell you one more thing?
I would love you to.
So, I've heard a lot of people describe their cube as exploring the classic aggro versus mid range versus control. And I think if you look at a lot of those lists, there are a bunch of 2/1s for 1 mana that go in the aggro deck. And there are some really resilient things that the control deck can use to win, like maybe a Celestial Colonnade or something like that. And I've really been trying not to go that route. Can I tell you a story that kind of shapes my feelings here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't actually know if I've told anybody this in years, but in college, I was a chemistry major, and felt like I just spent all my time in the chemistry building. In one year, me and a friend who was a chemist, we started taking pottery classes and just got sucked into it. We loved it. And we were spending like 30 hours a week in the studio. And our instructor was an adjunct and was, I think, not getting paid almost anything and was trying to kind of shortcut the kiln firings. She did a bad job one time, so we got her to let us take over. We went to the studio, we fired this kiln, and we had to be there all night. So we brought some magic decks. And this had already kind of feel like our play in college had already gotten to the point where some people figured out how to just blow everybody else out of the water, and it was hard to play a game where two decks were balanced. So we said, let's make some mono white decks, which is something neither of us ever really played, have a bunch of little tiny creatures, have all the board wipes you can find, and we will just smash these against each other until somebody wins. And it might sound really bad, but man, we had so much fun. And I think part of the reason was that we had built in some different synergies into our decks. They weren't really optimal, but I don't know, we were just kind of there more for spending time with each other. So I guess in this cube, I've been aiming to kind of recapture that kind of magical time of playing these kind of janky decks against each other, but just kind of being there for the vibes, you know? And so there's a lot of cards that hopefully have synergy and fit into multiple decks, but I'm not trying to support sort of your standard classic aggro deck or your mid-range deck or whatever. And my worry is that that sort of just turns everything into a weird soup, but I haven't gotten that complaint yet. So
Well, there's a reason people like soup too.
yeah, a bunch of different stuff in there.
But I think there is something to be said for what it seems like you're aiming for with part of this list is that you're not trying to extract particular decks out of it. Like there are themes or there are some archetypes you're leaning into, but it's not like who got the artifact deck and who got the reanimator deck. Like there are pieces that are going to connect in different ways that makes it more interesting.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. I remember hearing a podcast where somebody was talking about making a new cube and they listed off all the decks that they wanted to support, and my mind was just blown. Like, what do you mean? You already know the decks? Which now I can totally see how that's absolutely a way you could go about designing your cube, but it hasn't really been my goal here. And yeah, it's been neat to see what people come up with and all the different kind of mix and match ways people put things together that I wouldn't have expected.
And I suppose worth mentioning, it's just different strokes in some ways.
I don't think there's anything wrong with building a cube that way. I think I wasn't capable of doing that at the time I built this cube because I had no idea about, decks from the past or how lots of these cards worked. I just found them and stuck them in.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I've appreciated about how you described putting this together. And I think how you've approached some of the other projects you're working on, like your Five Alives, where it's a lot of it comes from pieces that you have. Like you're using these elements from your commander decks or from other decks that you've enjoyed playing. And then you just get to put them into a new context for people to enjoy in a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
As I've explored playing around some with Five Alives, I found myself kind of lost in the tinkering space where I was on Scryfall or I was putting lists together. And then all these folks that I've enjoyed seeing their lists are all like, oh no, I just dug these out of a box and like just put this together. It made me feel like, oh no, now I'm stuck in the intellectual space and I need to just go like put cards together and play.
Oh yeah, I feel that. I've been kind of chatting with people about their Five Alive lists, and I've played some of DSB's. I got to play AI Breddy's list when we were at CubeCon. I hadn't
Yes.
actually put together my own Five Alive as like a two-player thing until this past week, because when all the kind of Five Alive tinkering was happening 6 months ago or 9 months ago, I just wanted to turn it into a draftable thing for more people so that we could play it at Cube Night. And I made an 8-player version. And just like you were describing this past week, I was trying to like start from scratch to make a 40 card version. And I think I tried 3 separate times and then eventually just took out my box of cards for the 8-player version and shuffled through till I found 40 cards that seemed like they'd be good in a 2-player version and went with that. And it was a lot simpler.
Outstanding. That's so good. I think for clarity, Five Alive is a format. I don't know if we defined that here, but generally that just refers to a draftable format where players are generally picking up their opening hands, but players start at five life.
I should clarify one other commonality. So all the lists like this I've seen have a shared library and a shared graveyard, but you're sculpting your opening hands through some kind of draft. I know DSB and a couple other folks have made lists where the idea was to rotisserie draft your opening hand. At KubeCon, AI Brady showed me his version where he makes packs of five and you draft out of those with a bunch of cards getting burned to make your opening hand, and all the burned cards just end up in the shared library, which I really liked. So that's what we tried when we did this last week.
Yeah, I think that version usually is looking at 40 cards. So then
Yeah,
each person has four packs of five cards apiece. Pick one, pass, pick one, burn three.
right.
Except the last pack, you only get to pick one and burn the rest, and that becomes the shared library.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I really like that version because in the rotisserie draft version, it feels like probably there's just an ideal way to go. And because of the way a lot of the lists work, once an opponent takes one thing, you can't let them have that other card. And so you pretty much have to hate draft it, or you have to look for a strategy that counters that. And it feels sort of like the number of different choices just quickly gets constrained. Whereas if you're doing the draft and burn strategy to make your opening hand, you don't know what they've already taken. You don't know what is coming still in the draft. And it feels like there's a ton of different ways that your opening hand might turn out.
Yeah, I was thinking about how with the face up version, with the rotisserie version, it feels a lot like an abstract game in some ways, like chess or checkers, where all right, if you do this, I must do this. Like you nailed that on the head. That was something I was trying to put into words.
And I think it also, just like chess, it's really easy to just go into a brain meltdown where you try to figure out if I do this and then you do that. Oh my God, I'm trying to think 5 steps ahead. And
It becomes the scene from The Princess Bride. Well, now clearly I can't choose the glass in front of you.
yeah, for sure. But if you're doing the just draft a few packs and never really quite know what your opponent's doing, and there's all this hidden information, you don't have to think about that hidden information. And so it's easier to just kind of churn through it.
Well, and then with a small environment like this, it sounds like you're able to iterate a lot of times in a small space. And if you like it, keep doing it. And if you don't, just put them back in the box and go again.
Yeah, for sure. We've been really playing around a lot with these small things and like battle boxes in our local group because sometimes some of us show up early and we've got a few minutes to kill. And so if you've got something really quick to fire and you just try it once and maybe it's fun and it's kind of just, I think it's nice to just have less emotional investment in it. If I lose this game, I don't even care because we're just kind of here hanging out and now we'll do the real thing we came for.
Do you think that emotional attachment or lack thereof extends to the cube itself too? I'm thinking in a contrast to a project like alternate timeline that you would have spent years on, really, versus something that's more compact.
Yeah, I think definitely there is a different level of emotional investment. So I don't even know the last time that I tried to check to see if there were any new cards that I might put into my like 5 life cube. 5 life Wizards Duel, that's my draftable version. But it feels kind of like, I think my marketing pitch for that to the local group was that I played the Bolt Cube of Keldon's, the Unkinator,
Hmm.
at KubeCon 2023, and I loved it, but he had clearly put in so many hours and so much time to make that, and it was something so unique that I didn't really want to try to riff too close to his design space, and I didn't want to clone his cube. So going up to 5 life made it easier to just say, yeah, people have 1/1s and some of them are pushed and some of them are bigger than 1/1s and nothing kills you in one hit. We'll see what happens. I think one part that I really liked about it is something that some people might find negative, which is just that I think it is potentially less skill testing. At least depends on which version you're playing, but the top decks can really be swingy.
Yeah.
And you don't have control over what's coming off the top of the library. And so in some of these low life games, I've seen some of our less skilled players come up with a really awesome win and come out of nowhere and topple the player who's definitely more experienced and more skilled. I really like that about these, just that there kind of is that variance, and that it's easier to just not even worry about what happens either way, because it's just so much more of a little bite-sized snack instead of a full meal of oh, I put in all this time drafting and building my deck. Did I build my deck right? You're kind of cutting out a whole lot of that emotional investment, which I think is cool.
So, Joe, as you think about Five Alive, as you think about alternate timeline, what advice would you give to other designers as they're considering their own projects?
Yeah, so one is associate with somebody really creative who's always coming up with new ideas. Like I've been lucky to be just kind of next to DSB, absorbing the cool ideas coming off of him. I think also a lot of the advice people get for making their cube and tuning their cube, I think these are the three most common. Just make a cube, get people to play test it. It'll help a bunch and it'll kind of crystallize for you what changes you need to make. I think that's really good advice. Another one people say is just put cards you like in the cube and it's gonna be fun. And that's one that I've been a little nervous about because I've definitely played cards I like and had other people not like the experience of playing against those cards. Maybe other people don't like those cards. Another one that people, I think, say a lot is to get feedback from people. And to me, that's really, really extra important if you're somebody like me who just definitely has big gaps in their experience in Magic, right? There's all these years where I didn't play. I've never played seriously in competitive formats, tournaments, or anything like that. And so, like, as an anecdote, a month or so ago, I got a bunch of help from people on Cube Talk to help me kind of rehash a couple sections. And some of their advice was cut these 5 cards that personally I like, and I know one person in our local group likes things like basically a 1 mana green counter spell that protects your creature. And enough people told me, oh, I really hate this kind of effect, that at first I was resistant to it and was like, well, you don't know my cube and I like that. And thought about it and was like, these people are so much better at magic and cube design than me. I should just listen to them and make these changes and see how it goes. And I've been really happy actually with those changes. So I think it can be really hard to take advice, even when it's good advice. And so, kind of stepping back and thinking, do these people really know a lot more than me? Maybe I should listen to them. Is definitely a good thing to do.
I'll be honest, Joe, that was not the direction I thought that was going to go. Like with, it's like, I know what I like, or I have a sense of where what I think I'm going to be doing with these kind of cards. And when somebody else comes and says, don't do that, I was ready for you to be like, so I stuck to my guns. But that's
No,
really
no.
interesting.
I got some more feedback, kind of similar to that, after folks did an online draft maybe 6 or 9 months ago. And Glass Blowings from the Cube Talk Discord was nice enough to give me a whole bunch of feedback about effects it seemed like there were too many of, and what worked, what didn't. And I mean, really, this cube has had way less play testing than probably most of your cubes out there for people listening who have cubes. And so I've found that that's really useful.
And for what it's worth, I don't know that you have to downplay any, skill or skill gap. I think you've created something that people have latched onto and that have really enjoyed. All the feedback I've heard is that, this is capturing something unique. So for what it's
Yeah.
worth for me, it sounds like you're doing something great.
Thanks, Cade. I guess I do have another thing, which is
Yeah.
not maybe the the thing that people want to hear, but I think after playing this cube for over a year, I felt like, oh, now I actually understand what this thing is and what I've created. And I can't tell you, hey, I want a card that does this, but I'll know it if I see it. And so I recently went through, I don't know, 5,000 cards on Scryfall where where I figured out, I've got my filter. Hey, take out all the planeswalkers, et cetera, et cetera. I used one to just cut out anything with more than 20 words, and just looked through a ton of cards looking for new things. And I found that also pretty cool to say, hey, I'm going to cast a wide net and just see what feels right. So I don't know, maybe not the greatest suggestion if you don't have like 20 hours or something to just look at magic cards, but it might be fun.
My sincere hope is that there's somebody who hears this is like, yep, this was the validation I needed, and just jump straight on Scryfall. You know,
Yeah, I did really feel like I was learning about magic history and lore and mechanics. It was maybe not catching up for 10 years of inactivity, but it kind of felt like it.
that's so good. Well, Joe, this has been a blast to talk through so much of this. I get to ask one of my favorite questions here as we're turning toward wrap up. If you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you choose and who would you have do the illustration? Noting that you said you don't like showcase frames. I know.
Oh, that's so perfect. Uh, so I knew this was coming. I've been thinking about it. And my card I wanted to do, you wouldn't be surprised based on what I said already, was Dark Confidant. Uh,
Yes.
but I had a funny moment because I thought, I know the artist I want to pick out. I'm going to look at some of their other art on Scryfall. Lo and behold, the card I was asking for already exists. so, so I was going to say that I wanted Dark Confidant painted by Mark. I would say Mark Zug, but I heard someone at KubeCon say Zug. Do you know the right way to pronounce this person's name? Zug?
I don't. I had heard it as Zug, so perhaps we're all wrong.
Yeah, I don't know, but I really, really like some of their art. I have Grinning Demon in my cube now, and it's one of the card arts I just love the most because it's so scary looking and kind of realistic and also super weird. Why is this demon smiling at us? um, so that's the artist that I had picked out, and I found, oh, there is a Dark Confidant by this artist, but it's only borderless. So I filtered it right out of my brain like it never existed. So my actual pick is a new card in the cube that does almost the same thing. I've really, really been liking Darkstar Augur,
Yeah.
which is from Bloomborough and is basically a flying, slightly bigger Dark Confidant. But I'd like it done by Mark Tedin because
One of the OGs.
yeah, one of the old original Magic artists. Actually, the first card that I remember buying just for the art was Cyclone by Mark Tedin. I have the version from Arabian Nights that is like really not a very playable card, but oh my god, the art's cool. There's this storm above a city, and I think that would be awesome. But it would have to be in a version with a regular border and no foil, please.
This non-foil, non-showcase promo for you, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know if that will ever exist. It won't, but that would be cool.
Well, Joe, this has been a delight. If folks want to explore any of the Five Alive projects you're working on, or get a closer look at alternate timeline, where should we point them?
I am mostly just active on the Cube Talk Discord. I'm Joe Donkey there. I think there is in the channel for format tuning or for cube updates, whatever that is called. There's a place where a lot of people have been sharing their Five Alive lists, and I know there's some people that have made 2, 3, or more. And I've really just kind of been along for the ride and test played some and kind of dabbled there. So there's other people that I think know way more about this format and would be happy to share and help you tune your list too if you've got one.
Well, no, you're a big part of it. It's good to keep doing those things together. Well, thank you so much again for your time, and looking forward to if opportunity arises, go explore the foothills, and maybe we'll record a different podcast at some point.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Thanks, kid.